Okay, yeah,
Okay, sorry.
no worries.
Continue. So we're Pablo. We're explaining React. The big picture is React is a framework for JavaScript and enables you to use a lot of predefined functions. Is that correct? Um,
Yeah,
Efficiently. Mhm.
so basically React is a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. And so what that really means is that React has a bunch of JavaScript code that was basically written by Facebook, but it's a React team within Meta, basically. And so they created this library, and they also created what's this new language, so to speak, called JSX. And what JSX is, it's a language that mixes JavaScript and XML, but really it's JavaScript and HTML. So what that looks like is code that kind of looks like this, where you have JavaScript code that can incorporate raw HTML such as divs and such as links. But then on top of that, when you create what's called a React component, then that allows you to use that component as an HTML element. So for example, here, you can see that we create this class hello message, and then you can use that kind of like you would create an element, like a div. And so that's the beauty in like the most base level of why React is nice. Because in JavaScript, you are always going to have an extra file of HTML, and then it's very complicated to add elements and to work with elements and to like pick and choose what elements render. And React will handle all of that. If you have 10,000 elements in your entire website, which is not uncommon, but only really, let's say, like 100 of them, 100 like elements like this page is showing at a time. React will understand all of that and only show you the elements that you want. And so when I say element, you can really think of an HTML element. And that is just basically an HTML element is just any element like a div, a link, text, like a paragraph, anything like that of the HTML that you would really see in your HTML files. Um, these are all different types of elements. In React, they use a term called a component. So instead of elements, they use components, which are basically just React elements. Does that make sense? I want to stop there because that was a lot of information. I feel like we can stop there and answer some questions. Um,
Sounds logical to me.
what?
Sounds logical to me the the context you put everything.
All right. Does anybody have any specific questions about this so far? Okay. So we can go into a little bit of like how to use it so so we can add a little bit more context about that. So for example, let's say we wanted to create a new project with just raw HTML and JavaScript. So I would need to go in here, new file index.html, and I would have to say doc type HTML, and then open up my HTML code with your head, title, and then you have your body, right? And if I wanted to run this, I would have to open that in whatever we're using. So for example, if I do open raw index.html, now you can see that that's my website. There it is. And if I wanted to add JavaScript to it, I would have to add a script that has a source of, let's say, index.js. And then I would have to add index.js. And then we have JavaScript. And so it's pretty quick to get this going. But now if I wanted to say, I want to fix this typo here. Instead of saying he there, I want to fix the typo. So we can say an ID of para for the paragraph. And then I could say window.onload or onload equals a function that says document.get element by ID. Then I could use the same para dot inner HTML or inner text equals hi there instead of he there. And then now when I refresh it, you can see it says hi there. So that's a very quick demo about how to use JavaScript. And that doesn't really make much sense. It's very quick and it's just like the basic stuff to get all of this down. And you can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements in my HTML file just to get one paragraph drawn. And this is something that you can't get around. HTML needs all of these. And even with React, you can't really get around all of these. However, with React, you can allow it. Basically, React will go like this, create this div called home or whatever you call it. Oops, I don't know how I did that. And then so we could say ID equals like home or something like that. And then React behind the scenes will create all of this, automatically link whatever scripts, CSS files, JavaScript file, whatever you want, and then put all of your components into this home based on what is currently active. Does that make sense?
Feedback, please. Simple yes will help Ethan.
Yes, it would.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay, so instead of doing this, let's say we go back to, so we have this, and so what we can use is that we can use npm to get some npm is a package manager, and so if we look at npm.com, or npmjs.com, npm is just called, it's a thing called node package manager. And basically it allows you, it's a command line tool that allows you to download and install other people's code into your projects. So for example, if I say npm react, this is how I would import or React into my project. I could say npm I React, and then that'll install all of React's libraries into my project. It won't just copy and paste the files, it'll copy and paste all of like the binary JavaScript files so that you can't really edit React's code, because like, no offense, but nobody's a better React programmer here than React's programming team. So we don't want to edit their code. We want to install it directly into our code. And so there's another npm package called create react app. And this create react app is a really helpful thing that just does exactly what it says. It'll create a React app for you. And so if we install that npm I for install create react app, then it will go through and download all of the files that you need, and it'll download all of the other packages that you need. And so then what we can do is create React app. And then to find out more information, we can say -h to get help. And so it looks like, how do we, let's see if there's docs to actually use it. So we can look at the getting started. And so it says npx create react app my app. Okay, so we can copy and paste that in. And so we can name this react app. And so this is going through and it's creating just a basic React app so that we don't need to go through all of that process of building everything. Once this is done loading, I can go through and show you a little bit of what it actually is and what it's doing. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask while we're waiting.
Michael and Simpson, is this helpful or did you already know this? Should we go faster or slower?
I think this is good. I didn't know this. It's definitely helpful to know what NPM is.
Great. Great. Thank you for that.
Personally, I knew, sorry, but it's a good refresher, so I don't mind.
Great.
Thanks. So another thing about NPM is that there's other package managers. NPM is honestly the most popular, but there's plenty of reasons that you wouldn't want to use it. And for example, with our Invention Universe, I'm pretty sure that we're using Yarn, or at least we were at one point. And so Yarn is just another, it's actually, I'm pretty sure it says, what does Yarn stand for? Yarn, it's definitely an acronym. Yet another resource negotiator. Yeah, it's just another package manager. And so like it's literally called yet another. That's funny. So after we do this, you'll see here that it tells you a little bit about this. It created git commit. Okay, so we can look right down here. Success, created React app at blah, blah, blah. Inside the directory, you can run several commands. npm start, it'll start the development server. And so what's cool about React as well is that once you start the development server, it'll keep going and you can keep editing it. And then if it doesn't compile, it'll show you the errors. And I'll show you that in a second. But then you could also npm test. You'll never need to use this for now because we don't really do unit tests, which is something that we could start doing eventually, but it's not really anything we need to do right now. npm run eject will basically, once you feel confident that you know how to use React and that you know how to do everything without their like guidance, then you could eject, which basically gets rid of all of their pre-configured files. This won't get rid of React, it'll just get rid of their default settings, basically. And so, however, they suggest that we begin typing cd react app, which will move into the app, and then npm start. So what we can do is that we can go cd react app to get into there. And so this is what, so now you can think of our terminal is in this folder, right? And here we have node modules, which is node modules is all of npm. So here you can see all of the packages that's other people's code that we've installed into our project. So a lot of these, like, there's so many of these that we don't know what they like do, but they're all necessary for React. And they're all like, some of these are just like tiny, like little things, like very specific, like right here, enhanced resolve. Like that's definitely just like a very specific function. But then, for example, down here or up here, there's a core JS, and that's going to be a package that's way bigger and has a lot more functionality. But most of these node modules you won't need to deal with. And if, for example, we delete this, it's completely fine because what we can do is npm I will install all of the packages that are in our project because npm is very smart, and just because you have the packages in your node modules, it's not necessary. And another thing to think about is that since this node modules is just massive because it's filled with tons of other people's code, we don't want to upload that to GitHub because then we're just taking up so much space when you could really just reinstall it that quickly. And so what we do is that when we use Git, we actually ignore the node modules folder so that we don't upload that. And then what we can look at is our public folder. In our public folder, you can see exactly what I was telling you earlier. You still have your basic HTML because you're going to have it. Think of this public index as your raw file that you're never really going to edit, or not often. And so this is kind of, as you can see, it's just a website created with using React. and then they put in a title, they link to all of the correct JavaScript and whatever it is, and then you have your empty div root. And this is that home directory or home element that I was telling you about, that React will automatically compile and put all of your JavaScript in, or put all of your HTML elements in. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Great explanation, Ethan.
Awesome. And so if we move on from a public, I want to go down to package.json. This is something that's not specific to React. This is specific to Node, or to Node Package Manager, so NPM. So NPM will look for your package.json file, and this is basically where you configure your project. So we give it a name, we give it a version. What we can do here as well is give it, I'm pretty sure it's a publisher or author. So I could say like my author is Ethan Pollock, or we could say build it yourself, really whatever you want. And that's just a little bit more information for when you eventually publish it to NPM. And so then you can show a bunch of your dependencies. And so as you can see here, these are all of the dependencies. So other React projects that, or other NPM packages that we wanted to install. There's a bunch of scripts that we can use. So that's like npm start, npm build, npm test, and npm inject. Those are that's what these scripts are running. So you can fully edit these scripts and make it whatever you want. And so we don't need to get into the specifics of this, but this is basically how, when I delete my node modules folder, this file is how we get that back. So if, for example, I delete this project or that file, and then I run npm i. Oh, yeah. See, so it fails because it can't find that package.json. So that's what that is for. Let me undo that, and now when I do npm i, it'll succeed. So the package.json is the important one. And then last but definitely not least, we have our source. And this is where we have all of our actual project. The source is where all of our code is going to go. So what we can do is that we can go to, first is our index.js. This index.js is going to be the starting point of your React project. This is what your React is going to run when you start it. So here, what you can see is that this is going to be the code that actually imports React into our project. Without this, even this project that I currently have that's made by React won't have React in it without this. And so what we do here is that we find that root element, this document.getElement by ID, and that is the same as this element right here. So this div ID root that was in that basic index.html, that's this document.getElement by ID. And what we do is that we tell React that that's our root, and then we call root.render, and that starts all of the React modules. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So what a lot of people do is, so what a lot of people do is that they will abstract out the main app, like we do here. We put that into another file just so we keep this index page as clean as possible, just because this is like the base page. Does that make sense? And so as you can see here, it's super easy to add CSS. And I know that in one of the questions, it was what's like, how do you typically add CSS within a React component? Exactly like this. You just import CSS just like that. And we'll get into that more later, but very quickly, you can see that CSS is already being added. So now let's go into the actual app, and let's look at what that is. Well, actually, beforehand, I guess I can npm start. down in the terminal down here. And if I run npm start, it's building everything, and then it starts the development server. So here is our React app. A little basic React app, and it's still running. Notice down here how it's still running. And so when I make changes to code, so like, let's say, for example, I go, hello world. Down here, now that automatically shows up here without using live server or without using rebuilding or anything. And now you're asking, well, what if you have an error in your code? Like that, if I remove the end of that P element and so it breaks, so now it says error, but what's going to actually show up on the page? The same exact error warning. That's what's also amazing about React, is that in their development environment, just standard right out of the gate, you can see this. And I think that you've definitely seen this before when you're working on Invention Universe, and that's where this error module is coming from. That error, like all of this CSS and styling, is from our React app. And so what we can do is that we can fix that error, save it, and then it comes right back to what it was. And so, as you can see, this is the most basic React component. And so now I want to take a step back, and I want to go back to the docs for a little bit, because I think that the document, like the React docs, are fantastic. You can find the React docs just by going to reactjs.org, or if you just type React and then click on the first website, then you can go to their documents and you can read all about it and you can do whatever, or you can just go directly to the docs. And then here is where it goes through how to get started. And I've read through this once, twice, maybe 10 times, and I still don't know everything on here. There's so much in React that we don't know, but I would recommend, honestly, just reading through this if you're wanting to understand a little bit more of how to do it. But the way that I just showed you is a very easy way to get into React. But then what we can do is that we can go down to main concepts, and then we can look at some of the main ideas behind Java, or behind this. And so, like I said, JSX is basically, it's JavaScript and HTML. And then why JSX? It makes it so much easier to embed JavaScript into the HTML. It just makes it so much easier than splitting it up. But what I want to go to next is actual elements. So there are two different types of components. There's only two types of components. There's a function component and a class component. In Build It Yourself, they use class component quite often, just because it's kind of a legacy. It used to be way more popular to use class components, but in modern years, function components have definitely been easier and way more intuitive to understand. And what you can think of is that a function component is any function that returns an HTML element, right? So instead of having class welcome extends React.component, and then within this you have that render function that returns the element like this, and like you've seen, you can just have a function that just like it states, and then you can use welcome just like as if you would use it with a React component. And so you can see that in here is that they have this app, and it's a function app, and it returns some HTML code, right? And so this app is a component. That is a React component. It's not a React class component. It's a React function component. Same exact functionality, same result, same everything, different name and different syntax. And so from here, you can see that we're creating in this render function, we're creating an app as an element. This app as that element that we're creating is this function that we said, and it will return this. And so that's kind of the basic idea behind function components versus class components. Does that make sense? Or is anybody kind of not fully understanding the difference between those and what components are?
Says-
Yeah,
That
makes sense. Yeah.
Awesome. So moving on a bit, yeah, I guess we can keep this for now, but somebody asked the correct way to add CSS, and let's look at this. So this app is this CSS file. So you can see here that we're just literally writing import app.css. So in this same folder, we have app and app.css. Let's say we wanted to create a button or whatever it is, right? What we can do is that instead of creating just a bunch of files, we can create, like, do you see how like there's a bunch of files in the same source directory? What we can do is that we can create a folder called special button. And then in here, what we can do is new file as special button.jsx or JS. And then in here, we could say export function. Actually, let's just say function special right? So now we have a special button. And what we can do is that in this app, instead of all of this beautiful stuff that they have, let's just do special button. And when I run this, let's see what happens. Special button is not defined, right? So we can go back here and figure out special button. Visual Studio knows where it is, but my code doesn't, which makes sense. So what we want to do instead of importing all of this, what we can do is import special button. Still not there. And the reason that this isn't showing up, even though we're importing it, is because we're not exporting it on this end. You have to deliberately specify what function or what components and what functions are available for other files. So what we can do here is we can say export default is special button. And so now when we import special button, it should work. Not yet. So now let's try this. Import special button from special button / special button. All of that is the correct way to do it. So what we're doing is that we're saying we want to import the specific special button. We could also say star to import everything, but there's not multiple things, so it's going to fail. But that's the general way that we could import a new button. And then what we can do is that in here we could say special button.css. And then we could say so we can give it a little bit of a height and a width. And then we can check it, still not working. And that's because we haven't actually imported our CSS file yet. So what we want to say is import. Oh wait, actually, this is what we're gonna want to do that in this file. Import. So import special button.css. And we need to give it a path. And now compiled successfully, and now we have a width and a height. So that is how I would add CSS to elements. And then if you want to give it a class name, and now with that class name, we can say dot special button so that we can explicitly only use special buttons, have that. And so that's how you would add CSS to a specific element. Or Invention Universe does it a weird way where they use styles, like the style attribute and like apostrophes to like hard code the style attribute. And that's not really like a good way to do it, because number one, you don't get like all of the development features of like this. Like if I say color blue, I can see that blue. But if I were to make this like that apostrophe thing, and paste that over here, it's not going to show up the same. It just doesn't really work the same. So my recommendation is to use CSS in this way, where you're importing an actual CSS file that specifically goes with what you're working on. And that's not to say that if you have multiple different components, so like let's say we rename this to let's say like this is a normal button, then we could still use that same CSS, even though this is a different component. So we can still use that same CSS file. It's not like this is specific to this, but it is being imported in this file and in this file. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, is that you can reuse CSS. So you don't need to if I were to create another button in somewhere else in my project, I wouldn't copy and paste this or put it in that project. I would just abstract out that CSS, put it in a main thing somewhere, and then use that same CSS class. So let's look at some other questions. What should and should not be included in the render function? So in the render function, is it's a class component representation. So let's say I wanted to create let's say I wanted to create a class component for this. So what we would do is that we would say class special button implements. Pretty sure. Let me just make sure. Oh, extends. Okay. Extends React dot component. And then we would have our render that will also do the same exact thing as what the special button function does, right? That's kind of the beauty of this, is that the React component is going to have all of these extra functions like get, or like component did mount, component did update, component did catch, like should component update, all of those kind of, like a bunch of these functions are replaced with a thing at the beginning of your function component with use state. And this use state is what's called, all of these use whatever are called hooks. Those hooks are ways to kind of like, it's very complicated, but it's a way to like hook into a different component and get information out of it, or a different part of the project and kind of get information out of it. So let's see, where is hooks? Oh, hooks is down here. So actually, I guess let's wait on hooks a little bit. I'm gonna go back to function components for a little bit, and then I want to show you props, because props are something that's pretty cool. So props is a way for us to say, hey, instead of this, I want to say text equals click me, right? I want this button to say click me, and that's going to fail because, oh wait, that's going to fail because I have the word use right here, but that doesn't fail at all. But it doesn't show up. So what we can do here is that if we say props, this is going to be any properties that we give to the component, such as these or the text in the middle. So what we can do is that we can say props dot text, because since it's JavaScript, we can just assume that it exists. And so what we can say is the value of this button is props dot text. And now the click me shows up. So props is a way that you can send information from one component to another. And that works like hierarchically. So if you have your app wanting to send information to your special button, that's how you would do it. But you can't really send information back through props, right? Like I wouldn't say like props dot result equals 5 and then get, like, you can't access the props from here. That's a different props. It's all unique and specific to the current function that you're working on.
Great, Ethan.
Yeah, so that's how you would use props. Let me look at the questions one more time. When should somebody use props or state? So state goes with the hooks. So because use state is one of the hooks. I think that we should go over hooks on a different time. I'd like to go into those. I want to like kind of make a little bit more, some more obvious use cases. With some demos for those.
Okay,
Just because I think it would make more sense. Inlining is not bad practice if you know what you're doing. So the question is it bad to add inline CSS within JSX elements? And I would say it's not bad, but it's for specific uses. So for example, if like, let's say we have a bunch of these buttons, right? We can't because we're returning. Let's say we have a div. So let's say we have that, and then we have a bunch of these buttons. And then if I wanted to just say like style of this one, scale. So yeah, that's not working. I would say that this type of thing is okay, where you have the same type of element and then you're just kind of making a small modification on a single thing. Or even if you like say like you have like let and like depending on which index is like active, like if you say like you can do like scale x equals like something like that, like you can kind of use it in certain ways like that to make it make sense, but I wouldn't set all of those default values to using inline styles. It doesn't really make sense. I would prefer using like real CSS still. Yeah. And then so this one is a question related to Git. So when switching between working on different branches, how do you make sure you're working on different versions of the code? One way is that I have this, you kind of get better at that. If you're using the command line, then what I have for me is that I have my current branch on every line, so I can see that. If you don't have that, you can say git status. That'll tell you what branch you're on and what code has been modified. And so if I were to change, so like let's say git add dot git status. Now I can see that all of my changes are there. Git commit. So now you can see that I'm on branch main, nothing to commit, and I say git checkout -b branch 2. So now I'm on branch 2. I can confirm that by saying git status to see that I'm on branch 2, and then that's kind of how I know that my code's different. That's my way of doing it. You can also use git lens. It's this really cool thing that it has a bunch of features, and so basically you can like, if I get rid of this, you can see all the commits in your branch. So actually, let me like open this. Let me open our actual build it yourself, because then you'll be able to see what I mean.
Since then, has Ethan answered most of your questions?
Yeah, this is really helpful. I think for this question about like the different branches, I guess I was like more wondering about like the files with the code. So when you switch to a different branch, should it like change the
So,
code that you've been editing, or like?
yeah, so basically I would say, do you use the GitHub desktop app?
No.
What do you use? Do you use the command line?
Yeah, I use the command line.
Okay. Do you like that, or do you want to use some UI?
I don't mind it. I mean, I've never used the UI, so I don't really know like how it is,
So
but
the
I'm okay with the
UI
command
is
line.
pretty straightforward. It makes it very easy. It makes it so that you can't really mess up that much. I use the CLI, the command line interface, because I just like command line. So if that's what you're using, I would do something like this so that you can see, like, I could show you kind of how to do, we can set up a meeting. This doesn't need to be anything specific, just so how you can kind of customize your terminal a bit so that you can see that. But then like the biggest thing is just getting like familiar with like git status and git log, because both of those, git log shows you a list of all the commits in the repo. Git status will show you what branch you're on, as well as what files have been changed. So when you get, like, if I git checkout to one of like these branches, I want to go to one of mine. If I go like to this code, then I do git status. You can see I'm on Ethan panning, and then all of the code that is in here has been changed automatically to that my branch. And then if I were to change that, like again, like if I were to git checkout main, oh, git checkout master, then now my code has changed again. Another way to see this, if you're using VS Code, is it's down here, and like you can see it in here. There's this source control button which has these, and then git lens once again is awesome. It shows you all of the commits. It looks great. You can go to this and view the actual graph of it, and so you can see like everybody's commits and like kind of how they like differ on each branch. So for example, like let's see if we can go to my Yeah, I don't know how to search these, but basically you can see the different branches and how they all like converge and diverge or whatnot. So that's called git lens. You can see file history, branches. These are the branches that are like local, so you can see the actual like differences between them. And then on top of branches, remotes is going to be your actual GitHub. So that's this GitHub server, as opposed to the Git repo. And then the last thing that I want to show is this search and compare. So you can find specific commits, or you can find specific files using this search, anything like, and then you can compare it over different branches. I've yet to use this feature, but I could imagine that it's very useful. Once again, that's Git lens. So those are my tools that I use for that.
Fantastic. And anything else we'll save for next time or during the special session you set up with Sinzin?
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I want to go over console.log. Just because that's a pretty relatively easy one to figure out. So if I console.log this and let's npm start again, let's figure out if that happens. So let's inspect this console, and that hit twice. So that's like, it's weird because it's like, why did that only hit twice when like I don't, or it didn't only hit twice. It's like every time that it's redrawn, you can see that it's called. It's weird, but yeah, so it did hit that. So you can use console.logs to test that, and that'll show up either here or sometimes that shows up down here. Do you have more questions than like that specifically?
No, yeah, that makes sense. I was just wondering like where to go to see the
Yeah,
what's
so
in the
that'll most
yeah.
likely show up in the development console.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions for me, and we can go over hooks and other issues that you also feel like I missed.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Before we adjourn, Ethan, can you set up a time with Sinzin to meet on the scaling issue?
Yeah. What time works for you?
I think yeah, so I think mornings for me generally work better. I guess that would be afternoons for you, but I think I sent you in Discord my schedule before for a previous meeting. I think it's about the same.
Okay. I'll look for that, and if I can't find it, I'll just DM you again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Well, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the lesson.
Thank
Of
you.
course.
Okay. Have a good week.
luck.
Rosie, stay on for just a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Great. Okay, Michael, bye, Ethan. Sinzin, thanks for joining.
John,
See you
Yeah.
guys.
do you think you could send the recording to me too, just
Sure.
for reference?
Yep,
Yeah, thank you.
you're welcome. Okay.
Bye.
I'll stop recording right now.